don't want them to learn. And so that's what I want to focus on tonight. And I know we've already been through a few of these slides. I'm just going to back up a little bit so I can add on a little bit more. I love this particular picture right here because this I know is true for my boys. They think they're the big dog, you guys. They are doing something, they're deep in something, and they think that mud is just up to their ankles, but in real life, they're the little dog, and they don't realize how deep things are. They're clicking on things, they're reading things, they're watching videos. They're not always seeing the big picture. And as parents, sometimes we need to back up and be like, hey, you're the little dog here. You're tech savvy, but you're savvy in ways that are different than a lot of adult expectations, a lot of teacher expectations, and certainly college expectations, employer expectations, all of those kinds of things too. Like our kids are smart. I love that about them, but their knowledge of technology is completely different than what we might expect of them. I know I see that a lot at the workplace. We'll hire new people, they're young, they're fresh out of college. We assume they know everything there is to know about technology, but that's not necessarily the case. Their knowledge of technology could be different and likely is different. So I know that when I'm talking with my kids, I kind of make sure that they understand what they're seeing and what they're doing in the whole big scheme of things, and that they're not always the big dog that we see in the picture there. All right, Karina, can you flip us to the next slide here? So again, our goals for this session is just how do we protect our kids, what exactly we're protecting them from, and how can we use these tools to actually help them? What happens in 30 seconds. I love this graphic. I know my kids are old again, like I said, 13, 17, but I can still remember those days when they were toddlers. Like you can blink your eyes and all of a sudden they're on top of the fridge. But like crazy things can happen in 30 seconds. That's also true online. The amount of content that they can see and process in a mere 30 seconds is astronomical. It is not possible for us to monitor all of that time. And that's why part of this protection is also an education piece for our kids, because we can't keep track of all the things that they're seeing, nor do we want to keep track of all the things we see. We want to educate them about what to do with what they see, what they act with, and the choices that they make with all of that kinds of. So now on this next slide, I feel like I can't actually do a technology workshop unless I have some sort of reference to Star Wars or Star Trek, but I will tell you this story. I do a similar session in one of the classes that I teach at UIS, where we talk about, these are students who are going to school to be teachers. So we talk about what they need to know to be safe online as teachers. Should they friend their students, kind of topics like that. And I can remember, this was just a couple years ago, we finished the section and, we were, talking about some changes that, that they might want to make to their security settings, those kinds of things. One kid was like, I think I'm just going to join a convent. I'm like, now, first of all, you're a guy, so they're not going to let you join a convent. But that was not the point of this session, is fear. Like, I don't want anyone to be afraid of technology. It's nothing to be afraid of. We just, like anything else, is a tool. It's how we use it. No different than a hammer. We can use a hammer to cause damage. We can use a hammer to build something up. The exact same is true for technology. And so the sooner we teach our kids how to use that technology as a way to help them, and certainly for entertainment value too, but to protect them from that harmful piece, again, it's no different than tools we might use in a garage. We do safety on how to use hammers and how to use screwdrivers, how to use drills and how to use saws, all those kinds of things. We should be using that same kind of logic with technology, how to also use that safely and how to use it as a tool. So one of my very first tips that I want to go over here is just that forward thinking. If you flip us over to the next slide, is that what we do now is so important. You know what, Karina, I do have different slides in this. I've updated them since this one. Can I share my screen instead of you? You would have to click on that security button in the Zoom toolbar, which is that third button to the left, kind of looks like a shield, and enable screen sharing.
Okay, are we there now?
You need to stop sharing your screen and then I should be able to share mine.
Oh, perfect.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I forgot that
go.
you asked me that, but I forgot that I did make a couple changes.
Thanks for your patience, everyone. We appreciate it greatly.
I do. There we go. All right. So y'all should see my screen. And this part that's in red, this is really challenging for our kids to comprehend because for most of their experiences, especially when they're kids, we can fix a lot of problems for them. You know, they forget to return their book at the library. We can pay a fee. They can still check out books in the library. Maybe they're, doing chores or something to make that money back, but, there are problems they can fix. They show up late to basketball practice. Maybe they get benched for a game, but they can pay the consequences, move forward. It's not life altering. That is not true with what they do online. Once there's a problem online, there is no good solution, legal or otherwise. That's why it's so important for us to think about what we do now and what it might mean later. Throwback Thursdays is one of the easiest scenarios of this to describe. So a few years ago, I had a GA at my job at UIS, and she was going to school to be a social worker. So she wanted to be a school counselor at a high school. That was her career goal. And we were friends on Facebook. And one day on a Thursday popped up this darling picture of her in college at a Halloween party, dressed up, looked cute as a button. And I'm sure when she was 20, 21, that was a fantastic idea. But now that she was 25, getting ready to interview for jobs at high schools, here she is scantily dressed as Superwoman with a big glass of beer in her hand. And that showed up on her Facebook feed because it was Throwback Thursday. Now at the time when she wasn't doing anything illegal, so she was already 21, but that was not necessarily what she wanted potential employers to see. But because it was already out there online, there was nothing she could do to get it back. So once you text something, once you post a picture, once you tweet something, it is out there. You cannot get it back. This is a hard concept for our kids to understand because normally parents can fix things for them and the consequences don't always match the crime. In this case, she wasn't even doing anything wrong. She was at a Halloween party in college, overage, everything was fine. It's not that she did anything legal. It just feels inappropriate for the career that she was going into. And that whole concept of you do the crime, you serve the time doesn't always work online because sometimes the time that you're serving is way more intense and critical than anything that happened that caused it. And so I got her permission to share that story, but I always share that story. I share it with my students every semester too, because it's sometimes hard to think about what you're doing now and if it could have any consequences later on. Another piece of that is the concept that maybe it's not your picture. In this case, it wasn't hers. It was her college friend who posted and tagged her in the picture. And again, nothing she can do about it. What I tell my students, because by the time they're in college, they probably already have things posted online somewhere. Again, whether they posted or friend posted that maybe they wish wasn't there now that they can't get back because we can't get it back. I tell my students, I said, reach out to your friends, like remind them that you were going to school to be a teacher and you were trying to keep a very clean social media presence. Please don't tag you in anything. Please don't post pictures that you are in. Moving forward, it's one thing to be more conscious about what you put online, but we can't go backwards and remove anything that's there. But your friends will listen. I mean, again, the friend that posted this Throwback Thursday wasn't trying to harm her. It was a cute picture. She was like, hey, remember we had a great time a few years ago. She was not being thoughtless or careless. She just didn't realize the consequences it could have, which is how often things are online. So now is the good time when our kids are still young is to start preparing them that what is out there stays out there. So be very careful about what is out there and talk to their friends about what they're posting because the pictures that they are in that their friends are posting, same kinds of consequences for them. The big thing that I tell my boys over and over again is if you think you're in trouble online, tell me now, act now. This is not one of those things, let's sleep on it and see if we feel better in the morning. Because there are lots of times that's my advice. Like, they come home from school, something crazy happened. I'm like, you know what, I think maybe we're just upset. This may just feel better in the morning. It may feel better after we have dinner. It may feel better after we, go play some basketball, release some energy, release some stress. It may just feel better with time. That is not true with things online. If they think there's an issue, if they see something that they're uncomfortable with, if they think something's been posted that is not quite right or makes them feel awkward in any way, they need to be comfortable to tell you about it, so that we can act now. Some things don't just go away. And again, this feels so much different than a lot of the other scenarios. My boys sometimes come home from the school and they're like, you know what, so-and-so said something to me. It really hurt my feelings. I'm not going to be friends with it anymore. And I'm like, you know what, let's sleep on it, see how we feel in the morning. No one's going to remember what he or she said that embarrassed you horribly right now in a few days. That philosophy does not apply to us being safe online, because those things don't go away. So again, if your kids think they're in trouble or they think one of their friends are in trouble, now is the time for them to talk to you about it so we can figure out what we should do and we can act now. Part of preventing that is using the highest security levels possible on all of their social media. You guys, this is no easy feat because our kids have a lot of social media. They're on YouTube, they're on TikTok, they're on Facebook, they're on Twitter, they're on Snapchat. They all have different security levels. The tightest you can make things is always my recommendation. So the settings that say, show only this to my friends, not friends of my friends. That's where things get crazy. The friends of the friends, that's where it just snowballs all over the place. So, and I do this with my kids. I don't do this for my kids. So we log in together, we look at the security options and we set them together so they understand the settings that we're choosing here and also why we're choosing them. The second bullet here feels like a no-brainer. Don't post pictures of you doing something illegal, but that also implies that our kids know what's illegal. And, there are, again, some no-brainers, but there are some things that I'm not confident that our kids recognize as illegal or necessarily a bad choice. For example, one of my oldest son's friends posted a picture, a completely innocent picture, like nobody was doing anything necessarily wrong in the picture, except it was a bunch of teenagers in a car. And if you all know the rules about teenage driving, when you're 16, 17, you can only have one kid under the age of 18 in the car with you who's not a relative. So those kinds of things. And now again, this picture is out there. Now, is anything going to happen because that picture is out there? Probably not. Those are the kinds of things that, the kind of conversations that I have with my boys about anytime somebody's taking a picture, let's think about what's in that picture and who's in that picture and who might possibly see it. That includes pictures of where you live. One of the most popular pictures that we see in August are pictures standing on their front porch for their first day of school. Darling, I love seeing those pictures. They are all over Facebook and Twitter. I love seeing kids on the first day of school, especially when they do it. Here's the first day of kindergarten, here's the first day of sixth grade, see how much they grow and all that great stuff. Except for a lot of us, what we also have on our front porch is our street address, or at least our house number. And now all of a sudden that picture of our family is online, pinpointing where we live. Not that it's that hard to figure out where people live anyway, because there's already a ton of websites you can go to where you can search for people's addresses. But now we just made it a lot easier for people to figure out who lives where. And this is the kicker for me, how old their kids are that live there. So it would take me probably 30 seconds to find all of your addresses. Like if Krita just gave me your names, that is probably enough for me to find your address. What I don't know is who's living at your house. I don't know what minors you have there. I post a picture on the first day of school and now the entire world knows what ages of kids and what underage kids I have at my home. And that can be a scary thing. And you guys, that's what we do. Our kids don't typically post, hey, here's a picture of me on the first day of school. We're posting the picture of our kids on the first day of school. And so again, I'm not saying that that's a bad idea, but maybe in the middle of your yard, maybe in your living room, not on your front porch where you see your house number or a street sign or something that identifies where you live. All right, profile pictures. And I think this is where you guys left off before I was so terribly late. I'm cautious with my kids about what they choose as their profile pictures. And I have them check their friends on what their profile pictures look like too. I always encourage kids to use an avatar like this picture that you see here. Clearly, I do not look that beautiful in real life, but in a lot of my social media, I use an avatar so that people don't necessarily recognize me. But I'm looking at my kids' pictures and I said, your profile picture doesn't have to be you. It can be your favorite car. It can be your pet. It can be a hobby. It can be something that you enjoy. And if it's a picture of you, again, let's look at everything in that picture. Are you doing anything that looks like it might be inappropriate with somebody who might be wearing a shirt with a logo that seemed funny at the time, but may not necessarily be appropriate? Let's look at all of those things, which, to be honest, is a lot of work. And a lot of times my kids, let's just do the avatar thing. Like, you're making me work way too hard for a silly little profile picture. The same is true about email addresses. You know, at this point, most of our kids already have email addresses. They probably have a school email address, but almost all of our kids have at least a Gmail account by now. I cannot tell you how many resumes I see at UIS where their email address is not something like karamckelrath@gmail.com. It's sexy Kara, it's hot Kara, it's super cool college chick Kara. It's I hate school, it's bears suck, it's all of those kinds of things, which are fine for personal email addresses. But when our kids are ready to start applying for colleges, when they're ready to start applying for jobs, they need to have an email address that is generic. And, you know, some of these are obviously, you know, we shouldn't have an I hate school if we're applying to go to college with an email address. But even something that's like bears suck, maybe you really do hate the Bears, that's okay. But what if you're applying for a job and the person you're applying with is a huge Bears fan? Because those people exist, and now you've just shot yourself in the foot by something as silly as an email address. So one of the things that I would encourage you guys to do, if they don't have already, is go to Gmail and get your kids a Gmail account that is logical, that goes with their name. If their name's already taken, we usually just throw some numbers on the end of it. They don't have to be, and I would not encourage you to use the numbers that are related to their birth year or their birth date or your street address. So some different numbers on the end of it. But let's get your kids a more professional looking email address. And it doesn't matter what it is, if it's Gmail, if it's Hotmail, if it's Outlook, they all offer free accounts. Let's get them something that's appropriate, so when they're ready to apply for colleges and apply for jobs, they have something like that to use. If they also have a funny one that they use with their friends, there is no problem with that whatsoever, as long as that's not what they're using to apply for jobs or apply for colleges. And this is why it's important. Nowadays, employers and recruiters use social networking to research potential employees. I will not invite somebody in for an interview until I've Googled them to see what comes up. And now this can be tricky, because especially if you've got like a really common name, can't always be guaranteed that what I see is who I'm getting ready to interview. But you can see so much information on social media because so few people set their security settings, that you can be pretty confident with very little time about who it is that you're looking at. And I'll tell you the story. This is a true story. We interviewed somebody for a position at UIS. This was several years ago. I was on the search committee. As I do with all of the candidates before we interview them, I literally type their name in a Google search, like, let's just see what comes up. And what came up with a series of tweets that talked about him not believing that women belong in the workplace. Now, whether or not he actually thought that was true, or maybe, it was funny at some point, that was the first thing that came up. And that was enough for us to be like, whether this is true or not, this was a poor choice. This is perhaps someone who doesn't have the kind of judgment that we want teaching our students here at UIS. And we didn't invite him for an interview over a simple Google search. So number one, Google search your kids, see if anything comes up. That's a good place to start. But be thinking about, again, anything that they're tagged with, all of those kinds of things. Let's be cautious about those, because employers and recruiters are going to look at those. And it's going to make a difference when we're going to interview for jobs. Which leads us to do what is okay to share. So I've spent all of this time saying, don't do this, don't do this. Well, oh my goodness, what actually can I do? There are things you can share, and there are things that are good to share. The positive, the professional, when your kids win an award, when they get an A on a test, when they've done great in a sport or an activity, they're president of the chess club, they go to the Scholastic Bowl, all of those things are great to share on social media. Your kid does something nice for someone. Hey, there was a new kid that started school today and my kid had lunch with them. That is all beautiful to share. There is nothing wrong with that. The trick is sharing personal and private information. The personal information we should undershare. The private information we should never share. And you guys, our kids struggle to make that distinction. Adults struggle to make that distinction. Here's the difference. Personal is me sharing something like, ooh, the new pizza restaurant in town is awesome, loved it, had a great experience, right? That was personal information. That's my opinion. It was positive. It's okay to share. The difference between that and me sharing my boyfriend is such a jerk. That is private. Those things should never be shared. I talk to my boys about the difference between personal and private. And the private is never, ever appropriate to share. And if they are not sure if it's personal or private, don't share it. And that's what we go over again and again. We also talk about what they like and what they retweet, because whether it's fair or not, you are what you like and you are what you retweet. And what I hear from my kids is, but it was funny. And so I liked it. It made me laugh out loud. And you know what? It made me laugh out loud. I'll be honest, guys, I'm 47 years old. Sometimes when I see somebody trip, I instantly laugh. Is it funny that they tripped? Now, obviously, then I got hurt. But some things are just funny and they do make you laugh. Doesn't mean you need to like it, and it doesn't mean you need to retweet it. Here's another conversation I had with my kids. One of them liked something that was a TikTok video. And I'm like, why did you like that video? And he goes, oh, because the guy told a funny joke. Like, yeah, I laughed out loud. It was hysterical. I watched the video. The guy did tell a funny joke. Like, I laughed too. that was fair, except, and the joke was appropriate. Nothing wrong with it at all. But the guy in the video telling the funny joke was wearing a shirt with a racist message on it. And so I told my boys, I said, now, because you just liked this video, everybody that you're friends with now sees that you like it. You know, that's why we like it, because it shares, you know, our feelings about things. They don't necessarily know if you like it because you told a funny joke or because of the message on the shirt that you may or may not agree with. So again, with my kids, we have this conversation often. Like, let's make sure there's actually a benefit to what you like and what you retweet. And it goes back to the previous slide where we talk about how it's okay to overshare the professional things. I said, those are the things that you should like. Somebody post a video of them making some 3-point shot, like that video, that's great. Somebody post a video of them, you know, learning to play the guitar and that's their first song. And frankly, whether they did a good job or not, that's a great thing to like. It's positive. Those are the things that we should be associated with in our online presence, because everybody sees that online presence. Now, what about us? Are we harming our kids? Are we helping our kids? You know, I talked about, you know, the first day of school pictures. Sharing the positive, always a good thing. But how many times have we also posted something on Facebook or whatever that said, you'll never guess what my kid did today, especially if we tag our kid on that message. And again, sometimes we do it just because it was funny, because it was goofy, or because we want some moral support from other parents who are like, you know what, my kid did that too. You know, we're trying to be like human, like, hey, nobody's got perfect kids, including me. But now that's out there. And especially if you tag your kid, now if somebody Google searches your kid, they're going to see that posting. So something that I try and keep in mind is to be what I call recklessly gracious. When I post things online and I mention my kids, I make sure it's something that's gracious, that shows them in a positive light. I hear lots of people say, well, Kara, the reason I tag my kid is because then it's easy for me to search the tag and find all those pictures again, right? Like, and I agree, that's incredibly easy, except you can tag your kids and search, and everyone else can search for your kids too and see those things. So that's not the way to make a digital scrapbook, is to post all of those funny stories and things like that. And, you know, for those of you who may have younger kids, some of the things, you know, they do when they're younger, kindergarten, first, second, third grade, are really funny now. Our kids may not think they're so funny when they're 17, 18, and somebody pulls up this and, oh, hey, your mom said that on this day, you know, you pooped your pants in front of the entire school or something like that. Like, it's hard, again, that goes back to the now and later. It's hard to always be thoughtful about those things. So again, before I share anything, I think about that recklessly gracious. Is this a recklessly gracious thing for me to do for my kid? And if I can't say yes, I don't share it. Simple as that. Now, where is the line between protecting our kids and educating them to protect themselves? And that's a tough line to fall. So let's talk about these gated communities. There are lots of tools out there with parental controls. Windows, the operating system itself has it. YouTube has them. All of our smartphones, routers, like on the router in my house, I could specifically say YouTube is completely blocked or YouTube is blocked on these devices. Those parental controls exist everywhere. And when my kids were younger, I took advantage of them. And it goes back to all the things that could happen in 30 seconds that we started off with, because I don't watch my kids every second they have screen time. I know how much damage can happen in just a few seconds. I can't control that. So when they were younger, I used the parental controls. But then there came a point when I was like, what about being curious? Because that's important to our kids. I want them to be curious. It's how we start learning. It's why we start learning. Like, being curious is a beautiful thing. And for a lot of our kids, that's how they start something and end up someplace completely different. They were curious, so they typed something in a Google search. Great idea at the time. It doesn't take very many clicks to get off base or to click on an ad or do something like that. So there comes a point when I think our kids outgrow those parental controls. They need to learn how to protect themselves. And in my opinion, by the time they're in junior high, they're at the age where they can protect themselves. And so we have these conversations. We talk about good choices, bad choices, and how, when we decide we want to like something, when we decide we want to comment, when we post something, how to do it safely and wisely. And I talk about empathy. And I tell them, if this is not something that you would say to that person face to face, then don't do it online. If you wouldn't say it or do it offline, don't do it or say it online. And that statement triggers for my kids. Like, they get that. They're like, oh yeah, I would never have said that if they were standing in front of me. They might punch me in the face if I said that. And then there's no reason to say it online. We use this think as we're processing whether or not something is a good idea to post. First of all, is it true? Does it help anything? Does it inspire anything? Is it necessary? Is it kind? If I can answer yes to all of those questions, I feel good about them posting it. If I can answer yes to 4 of those 5 things, let's think about it and talk it through. And our kids need to be taught, and they need to be shown how to disagree respectfully and how to introduce a new idea. Some of our younger kids think that being kind means you have to agree with somebody. And we all know that's not true. Like, you can disagree and do it respectfully. Our kids don't always see a lot of that, especially online. You and I both know how many videos are out there of people arguing things, battling, and not doing it in a professional or respectful way. And so we need to show our kids, because a lot of times they don't see that. I actually have this printed out to like huge poster size, and it hangs in our living room, because these are phrases that I want my kids to be comfortable using and then to use them often. So instead of saying, hey, that's a terrible idea, or no, this is what I think about it, what if we started that a little bit differently? And we think about, again, what are we adding to that? Are we contributing a new idea? Are we agreeing with somebody? Are we supporting them? Are we disagreeing? Are we not necessarily disagreeing, but we are challenging them? Somebody posts the shot and says, hey, this is the greatest, 3-point shot ever made. Well, you know what? I saw. We don't have to do that in a disrespectful way. And a lot of times, especially online, when you don't have those nonverbal communication cues, you're not seeing people's faces. You may just be reading words. The words become very, very important. So I practice these words with my kids. We use them in conversation, so not just posting online, but while we're talking about things, we use phrases like this, because the more they use them with me, the more comfortable they're going to be using them with their friends. And it's not an easy thing for really people of any age to have effective conversations. It's a lot easier just to say what we think and not integrate it with the conversation. And so I want my kids to know, especially when they're online, how to contribute to a conversation respectfully, and to offer a different opinion. So this is one of those things that is really helpful for our household. Now I'm going to switch gears here and talk about phishing. Our kids aren't on email all that often, which is funny for somebody my age, because I can't imagine not being on email. It's how we conduct business. It's like a normal thing for me. My kids use email occasionally for school. My oldest son used it, to apply for colleges, but they don't have a lot of those natural skills to recognize phishing attempts. And so I wanted to share this link with you guys because Google put this out. It's free. And it's just a really great, we're not going to go through the whole thing, but I just kind of want to show you what it looks like. But it walks you through some pretty common phishes. Some of them are going to be obvious to us, again, because for a lot of us, we've already experienced this. Some of us learned this the hard way. We've had, our accounts hacked, our passwords stolen, we've had to reset everything. But these are skills that our kids don't necessarily have, and we don't want them to learn the hard way. So just to show you how this works, I go through this with my kids too. You put a name in here. So that way Google kind of personalizes the questions as you go here. None of this means anything. So I don't even put, this isn't even a legitimate email address, but it's just so that they can customize the quiz that we take. And they show us a series of, it's 8 different emails. And then you have to figure out whether or not it's phishing or whether it's not legitimate. And, you can point to things and you can click on things and get extra information, all of that good stuff. Here's where it uses that email address that I popped in there. We can hover over things, see where the links are going to go, and then we vote. So if I think this is legitimate, then it gives me the answer right away. Actually, this is a phishing email. Well, show me how I should have known that. And then it takes me step by step through all of the things that I should have noticed. And then it takes me to the next one. So again, I would encourage you to walk, it's just 8 examples, but to walk through that with your kids, because a lot of them don't have a great deal of email expertise, because that's not a communication tool that they use. They text, they Snapchat, they instant message, they use tools like that, and email isn't necessarily one of them. But the second they start applying for jobs in colleges, that is all email driven, and they will start getting blasted with all sorts of emails about everything under the sun. Or, the first thing they buy something on Amazon with their email account, now they're getting advertisements, and they need to know how to differentiate between all of those kinds of things. Now, as we wrap up this evening, where do I get more information? There's only so much we can squeeze in a session, especially when you have a dork presenter who can't figure out time zones. This Common Sense Media website is one of my favorite places for resources, not only as a teacher, but also as a parent. And they have this section that you see here that's called Parents Need to Know. You can look at those topics by age. I love these ultimate guides. Every time my kids get involved, and when Fortnite first came out, this was the first place I went. I'm like, I have never played Fortnite. I have not heard of Fortnite. It is insanely popular. I want to understand what it is, because again, I'm not standing over my kids' shoulders while they're playing Fortnite. I want to know what's happening there, what the risks are. Fantastic resource. They also have a blog, and it's a blog that focuses on digital citizenship, but digital citizenship is nothing more than being smart online. And so they have a ton of articles there about, should I friend my kids' friends? Should I let my child have their own Facebook account? And if so, at what age? And should I turn the parental controls on? And here's a conversation that I have with my kids all the time. They want to play a video game. With a lot of the video games, you have to put in their birth date. Based on their birth date, sometimes they turn on or off settings, based on their age. You have to be over 17 or 18 for levels to open up. And so we have those conversations with the kids. Well, do we put in a legitimate birthday? Do we age them up so that the whole game is unlocked? And so there's just great tips and tricks on this website that I encourage you guys to check out. Everything on the website is free. They update it constantly with whatever new is coming out technology, and it's just pretty fantastic. And so that was a lot of information in a short amount of time. And some of you may be feeling a little uncomfortable, like, these are crazy conversations. I already have, this is how I feel a lot of times. I already have limited time with my kids. Like, I'm at work all day, they're at school all day. We come home, there's dinner, there's homework, there's sports or practices or activities, those kinds of things. Like, and now what little time I have to have a conversation with my kid, I'm going to talk to them about sexting and their profile picture. And you guys, it's okay to feel uncomfortable. That's how we grow. It isn't always easy, but I promise you, every conversation you have with your kids about being safe online and what the consequences are and how hard it is to recover from consequences, you guys, it's worth it. Every conversation you have with them and their friends. A lot of times I'll have the conversation while they have friends over playing. I'm like, hey, let's talk about what we're doing right here. It doesn't always make me the super cool, popular mom. I'm okay with that. Sometimes it hurts to stretch our minds, and that's what we're asking our kids to do. And sometimes they're exhausted because they stretch their minds all day at school, and now they come home and their mom's lecturing them about being smart online. It's okay. It's okay for you to be uncomfortable. It's okay for your kids to give you the big, maybe you guys don't get the big sigh. I get the big sigh for my kids, like, all right, here goes mama, another one of her rants about whether or not our privacy settings are on. I can live with the big sighs. It's worth it for me. So as we wrap up tonight, just a big thank you, guys, and a huge apology for being so late. I am so sorry about that. This is one of the favorite things I have ever seen on one of my feeds pop up. Guys, if there was a parenting book that I found that worked, I would be broadcasting that all over social media. Use this, read this. It worked. It was wonderful. I loved it. It was awesome. It made parenting easy. It made my kids happy. That doesn't exist, you guys. We are all just doing the best that we can. And at my house, we live by grace and grit. We don't always do everything perfect. Sometimes the conversations don't go well. Sometimes there's yelling and screaming. Sometimes we all say things we regret, but we come back and we work it out. We give each other grace, grit through the hard conversations, and it's worth it, you guys, because what I want for my kids is not for them to be afraid to be online. I want them to be educated and knowledgeable, and I want them to be confident that when they encounter something, hey, I know what to do with this situation, or I'm going to talk to mom about this situation because I'm not sure what to do about this. But I don't want to limit them because there's so much that our kids can do with technology. I want them to be astonished. Like when I was in school and I wanted to learn something new, like to me, learning something new meant books. I love books. Used to be a school librarian, love it. I would go to the library. I would ask people. Our kids use the internet for that. Like I tell my kids every day, I drop them off at school. I'm like, hey, I want you to be astonished by something today. Find something that you are curious about, be floored by it and come home and tell me. And I hear some crazy things, you guys, don't get me wrong. In fact, today I learned which president was so fat that he got stuck in the bathtub in the White House, but it was an astonishing thing they learned. They learn it by using technology, and that's okay. I want them to see technology as a tool. I just want them to use that tool safely. And with that, let me open up the floor for any questions, any comments you guys have. Something else you want to talk about? It's already been a long day.
Kara, before you got on, we had someone who said that they had some concerns about the apps that have concerns with apps that I've heard of that can hide conversations or pictures that kids can keep on their phone. Can you talk to us about that a little bit?
So the kids are using apps that prevent you from seeing the pictures and the conversations that they have online?
I believe that's what was meant by that, yes.
Okay. Those certainly exist. Our kids probably find out about them before we do. And this is a tough situation because we also try to build trust with our kids. So the rules that I have with my kids is I don't log into their social media accounts. I don't check their phones every night. I don't read their text messages unless or until something happens that make me wonder if they're making good choices. So the other night, my youngest son said, I heard he was playing video games with someone. I heard him say something that made me pause. Now, mind you, it was completely out of context because he had headphones on. So I have no idea like what, his friends were saying to him, but we had a conversation about it that night. I'm like, I heard you say this. I don't understand what it meant in the conversation, but I'm concerned about how that made your friend feel when you said that. And at that point and it was based on a text conversation that had happened at school. And at that point we got his phone and we looked at his text messages together. And I'm like, you see how this spiraled out of control. It's a hard judgment call today. My older son is 17. You think he wants me looking at his phone? Absolutely not. But I do. Our rule is these are devices. First of all, you guys are underage, so you're my kids, but these are devices that I'm paying for. So So I don't, and I tell them up front, I say, don't feel guilty about checking out your phones and seeing what apps you have. And at the very least, and I'll tell them, I'm say, hey, I just want to see what apps you have open. So I won't read your messages. Show me what apps you have open. If I see apps that are open that I'm not familiar with, that I haven't seen before, then we take a look at what those are. Once every week or so, I tell them, hey, I want to check out your browsing history. Like I tell them up front, this is what we're looking at. I look at the browsing history. If I see something that's like, why was that something you were searching for? We have a conversation about it. So one day I can't remember, it was something weapon related. And I was like, how come we're searching for weapons? And it was like, oh, because I heard that you could 3D print a knife and it would actually cut things. And I wanted to see how that worked. And it was them being curious, which is exactly what I asked them to be. And so we talked about what did you do that information? You watched a video for how to 3D, we have a 3D printer at home. So it said you watched a video about how to 3D print a knife. What'd you do with that information? Well, nothing. It was just nice. You know, it was cool. It was neat to see that somebody could do something like that. Conversation was over. Like it was simple. But I tell my kids up front, you know, we will look through things. I won't do it without telling them. But we'll look through things together, their browsing history, all of those kinds of things. And again, if I see an app on any of their devices and I don't know what it is, we look at it together because those apps do exist that hide the conversations, that let them, you know, share videos, especially if parental controls are on. There are apps that can override those parental controls. And it's all but impossible to keep on top of all. It's both the beauty and the beast of technology is there are great things out there. There are other things out there that are not great, and they are both produced, I swear, at equally quick rates. But again, I'm upfront with my kids about it. I'm like, let's look at your phones. I'll let you look at my phone. You can see my browsing history. It's not very exciting, but you know, if you're having conversations with somebody, if you're interested in something, let's be interested in something out loud and have conversations about it together.
Yeah, Kara, that was exactly what I stressed right before you came on, was about having the difficult conversations. And as a human development specialist, I definitely do a lot of parenting programs, and we talk a lot about the uncomfortable conversation and how at the time it may feel miserable, but in the long run, you're doing it for the right reasons. And, you know, I'll refrain from, you know, going off on a longer conversation on that, but it is so very important. And you know, one of the reasons I asked Kara to be the guest speaker for this was because I knew that she had a similar outlook that I did, and the approach that we can't ignore technology at this point in our lives. I can't have someone come on and say, no technology, it's all bad. I mean, it's here and it's here to stay. And it's about learning how to leverage it, helping our kids leverage it, doing it wisely and safely, and equipping people with the tools they need. Because if we put on the blinders and we just ignore the facts, we're not doing a good service to ourselves or our kids or our family as a whole, or their peers, or the students in our classrooms. So I so appreciate everything you have shared, Kara. And I know that some of you probably have to get off and go on to other things, but if you would like to stay on the call with Kara and I, we would be happy to do that and answer any questions you have.
As you guys are thinking about whether or not you have any questions or anything else you want to talk about, let me just thank you again. I know been a long day. Everyone's working on dinner, figuring out homework, all of those other things. But I appreciate your time tonight. It's not easy being a parent. I can't imagine not doing it, but oh my gosh, there are definitely hard parts of it. But you guys are here, which means we're all in this together, and you know, we're trying to make good choices for our kids and help them make good choices. And I just appreciate you guys being here tonight. And again, if any of you have any questions, I'm happy to stay on with you and answer any questions or talk through anything. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your night.
Yes, you're very welcome, Melinda and Trinis. Our pleasure to be here.